In the direct aftermath of Russia's widespread and devastating aerial assault on Ukraine, the international community looked to Washington for a powerful response. Ukrainian officials, reeling from the damage to their cities and energy grid, had intensified their public and private pleas for more advanced weaponry, specifically long-range missile systems capable of striking deep behind Russian lines. The prevailing hope in Kyiv was that the sheer brutality of the Russian attack would compel the United States to finally provide systems like the Army Tactical Missile System, or ATACMS, with range exceeding 300 kilometers. However, in a major policy decision that sent shockwave through Kyiv and other European capitals, the Trump administration announced it would not be providing Ukraine with such long-range offensive capabilities. The decision, framed by Washington as a prudent measure to avoid a catastrophic escalation of the conflict, was met with profound disappointment in Ukraine and cautious approval in Moscow. The official announcement came from the White House in a carefully worded statement. It affirmed America's unwavering support for Ukraine's sovereignty and its right to self-defense, but drew a clear line regarding the types of weapons system that would be supplied. The statement emphasized that the administration's primary goal was to facilitate a negotiated end to the war, not to provide tools that could lead to a direct conflict between NATO and the Russian Federation. President Donald Trump, the statement noted, believes that introducing long-range missiles capable of hitting targets within Russia's internationally recognized borders would dangerously inflame the situation and undermine ongoing efforts to bring both parties to the peace table. The policy, the White House concluded, would focus on providing Ukraine with the defensive arms necessary to protect its population and hold its current line, rather than offensive weapons that could expand the geographic scope of the war. Elaborating on the administration's position, Secretary of Defense Peter Hegseth held a press briefing at the Pentagon. Standing before a map of the region, Secretary Hegseth laid out the military and strategic rationale behind the decision. He began by expressing his deep condolence for the lives lost in the recent Russian missile barrage, calling the attack on civilian centers reprehensible. However, he quickly pivoted to the administration's calculated policy choice. He explained that providing long-range systems like ATACMS carries an unacceptable risk of escalation. Moscow, he argued, has repeatedly stated that attack on its sovereign territory with Western-supplied weapons would be considered a red line, potentially triggering an unpredictable and severe response. The United States, Secretary Hegseth asserted, will not take actions that could lead to a direct military confrontation between two nuclear-armed powers. He stressed that his primary responsibility as Secretary of Defense is the security of the American people and the stability of the global order, which he believes would be jeopardized by such a move. Secretary Hegseth also addressed the practical military concerns that informed the decision. He spoke about the need to maintain the strategic readiness of the United States Armed Forces. The high-end missile systems requested by Ukraine are in finite supply, and their production is a lengthy and complex process. Transferring a significant number of these assets to Ukraine, he explained, would deplete American stockpiles that are essential for deterring potential adversary in other critical regions, such as the Indo-Pacific. Furthermore, he raised the issue of technology security. There is a tangible risk, he said, that if one of these advanced missiles were to be shot down or malfunction over Russian-controlled territory, its sensitive guidance and propulsion technology could be recovered and exploited by Moscow or its allies. The United States military cannot afford to have its technological edge compromised in such a manner. Instead of long-range missile, Secretary Hegseth announced that the Department of Defense was working to accelerate the delivery of additional air defense systems, including Patriot missiles, interceptors, and other shorter-range platforms to help Ukraine better defend its skies against the kind of attack it had just endured. The focus, he reiterated, is on defense and protection, not on enabling deep strike offensive operations. The diplomatic reasoning for the policy was further articulated by Secretary of State Marco Rubio. In a separate statement from the State Department, Secretary Rubio underscored the importance of maintaining unity within the NATO alliance. He noted that while all allies are committed to supporting Ukraine, there is not a universal consensus on the wisdom of supplying long-range offensive weapons. Several key European allies harbor deep reservation, fearing that such a step would drag the entire continent into a wider war. By withholding this system, the United States is acting to preserve the cohesion of the Western coalition, ensuring that support for Ukraine remains broad and sustainable over the long term. Secretary Rubio argued that a fractured alliance would be the greatest gift the West could give to the Kremlin. Moreover, Secretary Rubio framed the decision as a strategic choice designed to keep diplomatic pathway open. He suggested that providing Ukraine with the means to strike Moscow would eliminate any incentive for the Russian government to engage in meaningful negotiations. The current policy, he explained, maintains a degree of strategic ambiguity. The possibility that such weapon could be provided in the future remains a powerful point of leverage in any potential peace talk. It is a tool to be held in reserve, not to be given away prematurely. Secretary Rubio insisted that the administration is actively pursuing diplomatic solutions and that this decision is consistent with the goal of ending the conflict through a negotiated settlement that respects Ukraine's sovereignty, rather than through a military victory that could come at an apocalyptic cost. He announced that he would be traveling to Brussels next week to consult with NATO foreign ministers to reinforce this unified strategy. The reaction from Kyiv was one of shock and bitter disappointment. The Ukrainian presidential office released a statement expressing its gratitude for the defensive aid the United States has provided, but making clear its profound disagreement with the decision to withhold long-range missiles. A senior advisor to President Zelensky, speaking on the condition of anonymity, told reporters that the decision felt like a betrayal in Ukraine's darkest hour. The advisor argued that the distinction between offensive and defensive weapons is a false one when a nation is fighting for its very survival. Ukraine, the official stated, has no intention of striking random civilian targets in Russia. The purpose of this long-range system would be to disrupt the very military logistic that enabled the attack on Ukrainian cities, command posts, ammunition dumps, and airbase located in occupied territories and just across the Russian border from where the assault are launched. By denying Ukraine these tools, the official argued, the United States is effectively granting Russia a sanctuary from which it can continue to wage its war of terror with impunity. President Volodymyr Zelensky himself did not immediately comment, but his foreign minister, Dmytro Kuleba, posted a stark message online. He wrote that every day of delay and every refusal to provide the necessary weapons only embolden the aggressor and result in more Ukrainian death. He questioned the logic of fearing escalations when Russia is the one escalating daily with its attack on civilians. For Ukraine, the decision in Washington was seen not as a prudent act of de-escalation, but as a move that would prolong the conflict by preventing Ukraine from taking decisive action to cripple Russia's war machine. The mood in the street of Kyiv among citizens cleaning up debris from the overnight strikes was one of weary resignation and a growing sense that they were being asked to fight with one hand tied behind their back. Conversely, Moscow reacted to the American announcement with public approval. The Kremlin spokesperson, Dmitry Peskov, described the decision as a demonstration of responsibility and a glimmer of common sense from Washington. He told Russian state news agency that the Kremlin has taken note of the decision and views it as a positive, albeit small step. He reiterated Russia's long-standing warning that the supply of long-range missiles to Kyiv would have been a point of no return. That would have triggered the harshest possible consequences. Russian state television channels heavily promoted the news, portraying it as a victory for Russian diplomacy and a sign that the West is beginning to understand the futility of its support for the Kyiv regime. The narrative spun for the domestic Russian audience was that President Trump's pragmatism was prevailing over the more hawkish elements in the West, and that America was growing tired of the conflict. The decision also sparked a debate within the United States. A vocal group of lawmakers from both sides of the aisle criticized the administration's policy as overly cautious and strategically flawed. They argued that the best way to prevent escalation is to ensure a swift Ukrainian victory, which requires giving Ukrainian forces the best possible tools for the job. They accused the administration of being intimidated by Russia's nuclear threats and of inadvertently prolonging the war and the suffering of the Ukrainian people. In contrast, other political figures praised the president's restraint. Supporters of the decision, including those aligned with the administration's America First foreign policy, hailed it as a wise and measured approach that prioritized American national interests and avoid entanglement in a potentially endless and dangerous foreign war. They argued that the security of the American homeland must come before the offensive military ambition of any other nation. The Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, whose office is known to advocate for de-escalation, was reported to have been influential in the internal deliberation, providing intelligence assessment that highlighted the high risk of a direct clash with Russia. Ultimately, the American decision not to supply long-range missiles marked a pivotal moment in the war. While the United States continues to be Ukraine's single largest military backer, it has now publicly defined the limits of that support. The policy shift prioritized conflict management over decisive military victory, a move that fundamentally altered the strategic calculus for Kyiv. Ukrainian military commanders must now devise strategies to counter Russia's logistical advantage without the ability to strike at its rear echelon effectively. The decision placed a greater burden on Ukraine's own ingenuity and its existing arsenal of drones and shorter-range systems. It also sends a clear signal to both allies and adversaries that the Trump administration is committed to its vision of ending the war through a negotiated process, even if it means denying Ukraine the weapon it believes it needs to win. As Ukraine continues to defend itself from Russian aggression, it does so knowingly that its most powerful partner has drawn a line in the sand, a line that falls short of Kyiv's hopes for the tools to secure a complete victory. Many of my listeners, like 70%, haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, and so many of you don't even know that you haven't subscribed, and that is actually what makes the show going. It's almost like you're making a donation to the show. So that's why I ask again and again, because it enables us to grow and grow and grow. And we're going for the long haul here. And listen, if this is your first time listening to Sokhane Rich, you don't have to subscribe. You guys, your first one's on me. But if you have watched this show before, it's like you are a freeloader now. So all I would ask you is, if you have seen this show before and you like it, help me, help my team here. Hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build this show for you. That I swear. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. That's all for me for today. I will see you soon. Bye for now.